Over the last couple of weeks, I've been riding an electric bike. What an experience. Hello and welcome back to Ellis Reviews, and thank you for subscribing if you have, and if you haven't subscribed, the button is just down there. So a few weeks ago, a company called Fido got in touch and asked if I wanted to review an electric bike. And I said yes, because firstly, why not? But also you're probably a little bit sick of MacBook reviews by now. And I've been riding it most days to and from my home to this studio. And it really has been a hell of a ride. So this is my full review of the Fido D4S, and here's what I found out. So let's start with some prices and specs and stuff. The Fido D4S electric folding sports bike is £565 in the UK and £749 in the US. Now I know nothing about e-bikes whatsoever, but if you look at the competition, this sits right at the bottom of the scale in terms of pricing. So it's actually quite an affordable electric bike. So we probably could call it a budget bike, I think, potentially. So specs wise, it weighs 18.5 kilograms, it has 6 gears, it has a 250 watt motor powered by a 36 volt battery, which takes 7 hours to charge fully. It does 25 kilometers an hour. In the Queen's English, that's 15.5 miles per hour. It has 20-inch tires, an 80 kilometer range. It's foldable, it's waterproof, and it has 2 modes, which are electric and moped, which I'll explain a bit later. It also comes with a front light, mudguards, and a tool set. Quite a nice little package. In terms of setup, it wasn't too difficult really. I think the instructions were lacking a little bit. I couldn't find any instructions in my box anyway in terms of how to fit the mudguards, so I kind of gave up on that. Moving on to the design of the D4S, I cycle quite a bit, so I'm used to using bikes on a fairly regular basis. I've got a road bike, which admittedly I don't use that often these days, but I've got a hybrid bike, which I use most days. This doesn't look like a normal bike as far as I'm concerned. It's got this kind of very low profile. It does look like one of those kind of city bikes that you see people walking around with folding up, and it's not ugly by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm not that keen on all the cables that are on show. It'd be nice if they were kind of worked into the frame in some way, although I guess that's what you get when you pay at the lower end of the scale for an e-bike. The only thing I would say is that some people might feel a little bit self-conscious riding it because it doesn't look like a normal bike. It's clearly something else. And when I first rode it out of my street, I did think, are people watching me? That's stupid. You shouldn't care about that. Who cares what other people think? But it's just worth bearing that in mind. The only thing I would say is though, as soon as I started riding it, any of those concerns just completely evaporated. Now, if you want, you can just pedal the D4S as a normal bike. You don't have to use the motor at all. But that's no fun. Now there are 2 electric modes to choose from on this bike. The first one is called moped, and that is where it just gives you power assistance while you're pedaling. So you just pedal away and the motor kicks in. It gives you 3 gears basically. The motor kicks in and gives you a bit of assistance. And yeah, it just helps you get up hills a little bit quicker. Again, that's not quite as exciting as the other mode, which is the full electric mode, which is where you twist a little throttle on the right hand handlebar and away the motor goes. Now I'll come on to the performance of that in a moment, but just very quickly, riding it as a normal bike does take a bit of getting used to because of that very low hung frame, and it's quite a small bike anyway. It does feel at first a little bit, I don't know, a little bit not dangerous, but kind of unnerving to begin with. And in fairness, that might be because I ride a bigger bike normally, so this was quite a step down in terms of size. But like anything, like any kind of riding a bike experience, you get used to it pretty quickly. And actually when you do, it's pretty stable on the road. Those big thick tyres do make a big difference. You feel quite safe going around corners. And the saddle's really comfortable. It's probably the most comfortable saddle that I've used recently. The whole bike itself, the frame, is pretty rough going over rough bumps and roads and things, but again, you get used to that. I would say it's probably not for long distance. Although it's got an 80 kilometer range, I wouldn't take this on really long rides. Firstly, the ride is a bit rough at times. And secondly, going downhill, you've only got 6 gears to play with, so it's not got a huge number of gears. And I did find that when I was going down fairly moderate hills, I'd run out of pedaling power quite quickly. But that's why it's for nipping around, I think. It's not really for long jaunts. So overall, as a bike, it's pretty easy to ride, but you do need a little bit of practice just to get comfortable with it. So in terms of performance, that moped mode, which is that kind of assisted pedaling thing, it's okay. And it's nice if you want to get a bit of cardio going, but I don't know, I didn't find it that exciting really. I think the whole point of these e-bikes is that you get to use that little throttle. And that's why I tend to find myself using that electric mode more often than not. And on straight, flat roads, you can pretty much get away with just the throttle without pedaling whatsoever. In both modes, going up hills is much easier, as you would expect. You've got a bit of a push as you're going up, and it makes some of the hills around here, which aren't huge, but there's 1 or 2 hills on the way to this studio, which are a bit of a pain, they just completely just disappear. You know, you pull the throttle or you have the assisted moped mode on and it just takes you up the hill without much effort at all. I also found out that you can kind of crack and unlock a much higher speed limit. So out of the box, it will do 26 kilometers an hour-ish. That's about 15, 16 miles an hour. So this isn't really a trick, it's actually in the manual. You basically hold both brakes at the same time, twist the throttle, turn the unit on and wait until you see E004 on the screen. I did that and that unlocks it to about 30 kilometers an hour, which equates to nearly 20 miles an hour. It makes a massive difference. I rode it this morning to the studio on that mode for the first time and it's really quick. So performance-wise, it's a really exciting little thing to ride. And so far, the novelty hasn't worn off. I've only been riding it for a couple of weeks. That may change, but just the ability to nip from my house to here or into town to the gym, for example, it's really satisfying. You've got the little unit on the left-hand handlebar which shows you your current speed, and it's just such an easy bike to use. Now, it's important to note that it isn't a moped. You know, you can't expect to go really fast on this thing at all, but where it has some really big benefits are when you're in fairly heavy traffic. And I have a mixed kind of relationship with cyclists. I am a cyclist myself, so I'm acutely aware that we can be incredibly annoying. And if I'm in my own car and there's a cyclist in front of me, hands up, I occasionally get a bit annoyed. I don't do anything, it just irritates me a bit. But then I know that I am that person sometimes. So to have a bike that will nicely, you know, twist the throttle and nicely pull away pretty quickly without too much pedaling assistance, it just makes me feel better as a cyclist. Because if I'm at the front of that traffic queue, the lights are on red, as soon as they go green, all I have to do is twist the throttle and away I go. Now, whether or not it has any benefit for the people behind me in the cars, I don't know. It just makes me feel a bit better and a bit safer actually as a cyclist. The battery's great. I mean, I'm doing very short runs. The run from here to my home is about a mile and a bit, so it's not very far at all. So I'm not really kind of pushing the battery, but the fact that I know that it does 80 kilometers on a single charge, it just means I'm presumably never going to run out of battery. The one thing I would say about performance and kind of living with it is that it is incredibly heavy. Fido do say that they believe it isn't heavy for an electric bike. I don't have anything to compare it against, in fairness, so they may well be correct with that. But it is a heavy bike and it folds, which is great. But I wouldn't kind of treat that as a bike which you can then fold up and carry onto a train or walk around the streets with. It's way too heavy and a bit too cumbersome for that. I think the folding thing is more so that you can put it easily in the back of your car. But yeah, it is a heavy bike, which does obviously impact the performance to a degree, I guess. But also, if you're just pedaling without any power assistance, it's quite a heavy bike to pedal. Now, this all leaves a rather simple question, which is, who are these bikes for? I think these electric bikes, and particularly this one, which is the only one that I've ever used, admittedly, are brilliant and perfect for people who nip around to places. So for me, I nip from my house to the studio and back, and I nip from my house to the gym, which is in town, and back. That's it. You know, you're talking at the most a couple of miles for each journey. And because that battery's so good, and because the power is there to get you out of tight spots quickly, it's just, like I say, you feel safer using it and you can get to places quicker. And yeah, there is this kind of element of e-bikes, which is they're a bit of a cheat. But for me, I go and work out at the gym, or I do runs in the morning, for example, and I'm not kind of boasting saying I don't need any more cardio, because any kind of exercise is good, but I don't often want to get sweaty again. You know, if I've been out for a run in the morning, had a shower, I don't want to get back on the bike, get all sweaty and hot and bothered, and then feel horrible for the rest of the day. So it's nice to do those things and then jump on a bike which has lots of power assistance and gets me here without being too much out of breath. I wouldn't take it off-road. If you're an off-roader, stick with your mountain bike. But if you live and work in a city, or you have a very similar lifestyle to mine, I think they're a fantastic investment. And I think for the price, it's not bad at all, actually, particularly when you look at the competition, which, like I say, goes into the thousands. So if you're curious about e-bikes, but you don't want to spend too much money, I really would recommend taking a look at the D4S. This is someone who, like I say, a keen cyclist who had no idea what e-bikes were about. My mind has been completely changed because of this little thing. Now, if you've still got some time and fancy watching some more of my content, keep watching for a link to a video I did recently where I gave a complete behind-the-scenes tour of this studio space. But until next time, thank you as always for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.